The débat. The honourable member for Hamilton Mountain.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And then I seek unanimous consent to split my time.
Does the member have unanimous consent? Yes? Okay. Resuming debate. The honourable member
Madam
for Hamilton
Speaker.
Mountain.
I will be splitting my time with the member of Windsor-Tecumseh, and I thank my colleagues for allowing this. Madam Speaker, I rise in this House today to speak at third reading of Bill C-26, a bill which will amend the Canada Pension Plan. In my remarks Monday, I focused on how we in the NDP have found a mistake in the bill and our attempts to fix it. I described how the government had failed to include important provisions that would protect workers whose incomes are reduced because they take time to raise their kids and those whose incomes are reduced because of a disability. The government either forgot to include those provisions or excluded them on purpose. We are not actually sure which it is. There are differing opinions on this matter. I must say the government has been completely unwilling to shed any light on this matter. Government members have intentionally spoken around the issue, using the lines that have been written for them. I think many of them really don't know the answer. I think only the minister knows the answer, and he has been the most unclear in his comments of any member on the other side of the House. I then went on in my remarks, Madam Speaker, to describe the attempts by the NDP to get the government to fix the bill. Members on both sides of the House know the bill is flawed and needs to be fixed. We were encouraged by members on the other side of this House to go to committee and fix the bill. And so we worked hard with the Legislative Council and we developed the clauses and the language needed to put the necessary dropout provision into the bill that would fix the problem. And it's an easy fix. 2 amendments, less than 2 pages of language that would protect those who take time off for child rearing, mostly women, and those living with disabilities. What happened at committee was a real eye-opener for me, Madam Speaker. The Liberal members on committee were whipped hard to shut down any attempts to amend and fix the legislation. Even though we know that some of them understand the bill is flawed and needs to be fixed, they all lined up to support their use of procedural tricks to shut down debate. Not once, but twice. They should be ashamed, and I truly think that some of them are. The Liberals then had the chance to fix the flaw themselves when the bill came back to the House for the report stage. But, Madam Speaker, the government made it very clear they had no intent or interest in doing that. So here we are now at third reading of a bill that is still flawed, with the rights of women and those living with disabilities are still at question. Which leads me, Madam Speaker, to talk about where we go from here. Once we pass this legislation into law, will the problems we have identified ever get fixed? Will the provisions that protect women and the disabled ever get included in the legislation? Well, Madam Speaker, that is unclear. And that is making our continued support for this bill very difficult. We will vote for it at third reading because the CPP needs to be changed, and we have fought for a long time, alongside with our friends in the Labour movement, to have the government increase benefits for retirees. But we are very concerned about the government's supposed commitments to fix the legislation after the fact. We have heard in this House that the government needs to get the agreement of the provinces. Last week, we heard from the President of the Treasury Board, quote, "We are aware that more could be done in respect of the dropout provisions for disability and child rearing." And, in fact, the Minister of Finance will raise the provisions at the next meeting of the Provincial and Territory Finance Ministers in December, in the context of a triennial review of the CPP, unquote. And then the next day, we heard from the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance, quote, "Our intent is to pass the bill, as is. However, the Minister of Finance will then raise the dropout provisions at the next Provincial and Territory Financial Ministers meeting in December, in the context of a triennial review of the Canada Pension Plan." Also last week, we heard from the Finance Minister's Director of Communications that, quote, we're aware that more can be done with respect to dropout provisions for disability and child rearing to make sure that this expansion is as inclusive as possible. However, in order to make any changes to the plan, we need agreement from the provinces. The finance minister will bring up the omission when he meets with his provincial counterparts in December to review CPP, a routine process that occurs every 3 years, unquote. Madam Speaker, Canadians need to note the lack of a clear commitment in any of these quotes. Saying the minister will raise or bring up the omissions is certainly no commitment. How hard will the minister push the provinces to fix the bill, and including the missing provisions? We don't know the answer to that, Madam Speaker. I was hoping to hear a more clear-cut commitment from the minister this week. However, that commitment doesn't seem to be forthcoming. If any, the most recent spin makes me think the government is spinning away from any commitment at all. When the minister was asked yesterday by one of my colleagues if he would fix the bill, he wouldn't even address the question. Instead, what we got, the most shallow spin possible. This is all the finance minister would say on the matter. Quote, what we also recognize is that there will always be opportunities for continued improvement. Our job in working together with the provinces is to move forward on this agreement and then to consider other ways we can improve the Canada Pension Plan in the future to ensure that the retirement health of Canadians is always provisioned for, unquote. Very inspiring words, Madam Speaker, but hardly a commitment to fixing the problem caused by the omission of the dropout provision in this bill. What concerned me even more were the comments made by the member of Saanich Gulf Islands yesterday during debate when she said, quote, on the evidence we have before us, it appears that the bill will disadvantage women for no apparent reason other than an oversight. I did have a brief moment to discuss this with the Minister of Finance early this morning, and his position is that to do whatever the NDP asks now would result in a transfer of wealth from poorer women to wealthier women because of the way the calculation works. Unfortunately, I do not have the full facts on this, unquote. Well, Madam Speaker, we don't have the full facts on this either. And I told the minister that when he tried to spin me with the same argument in the hallway after question period yesterday, I also told him that the argument makes no sense at all. In fact, I think probably the inverse is true, given that eliminating the child rearing dropout for the additional benefit would presumably penalize lower and modest income mothers, while higher income mothers, since women in higher income households are better able to adjust. Besides, the argument fails to take into consideration that the CPP is basically an insurance plan into which people pay benefits. Raising benefits at one level does not mean having to reduce the benefits at another level. Surely someone qualified to be the Finance Minister of Canada should know this. I also have to wonder where the minister came up with the calculations he says his argument is based on. We have been told all along that no costing of the dropout provisions has ever been done. Where did the numbers come from? If the minister has his numbers, will he share them with us? Will he share them with Canadians? But, Madam Speaker, I fear the Finance Minister's proactive spin on this argument may yet to be our best indication of the government spinning away from any commitment to fixing the dropout provision mistake. What we need, what Canadians need, is a clear-cut commitment from the Finance Minister. We need to know that he intends to come away from the December meeting with his provincial counterparts with an agreement in hand. The agreement must fix the problem with the legislation and include a dropout provision that will protect women and those living with disabilities. Will the Finance Minister stand up in this House and make that commitment? Madam Speaker, the NDP will remain vigilant and will be persistent in our demands the government fix their mistake. This government and the minister should be aware that the NDP will not let up the pressure until they follow through on their commitment. Canadians deserve no less. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions